Hey everybody, Ryan here from Music City. Welcome to Music City Live. This is episode 4. I'm here with Brad Gibb. Brad, thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Everybody, Brad's a talented musician, band leader, and recent program director from Chorus Radio, but no longer, right? Recently, but no longer.
Recently retired.
Retired, yeah. But a long time, right? Like 25 years in radio?
25 years in radio, 23 with Chorus.
Wow.
Yeah.
Like I was saying earlier, that's like a legal lifetime.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So a lot of experience. What got you into music?
Like in general?
Yeah, in general. Yeah.
I think when I was younger, a big part of it was my mom and my mom singing in the church choir.
Really?
And that was kind of the number one thing. And then my older sister started taking piano lessons, and we got a piano brought into the house. So I started farting around with the piano. And I think it was at that point I figured, you can actually make music by doing stuff.
Yeah.
And a lot of it was just learning by ear and being, trying to be creative that way.
Sure.
Yeah.
And then bands came at some point. Like, when did that all sort of?
Yeah, I had my cousin was a drummer, and he taught me how to count to 4,
which is important.
Yeah, exactly. So I learned how to, I got to saved up my dough and got a drum kit for a couple $100, and played drums for a couple years. And I think when I was like about 11 or 12 years old, I decided to pick up the bass guitar.
Okay.
And I think it really, I wanted to play guitar, but I was drawn to bass, and it was Flea from the Chili Peppers that really kind of drew me to you should be able to learn how to do this.
Yeah.
So, that was kind of it.
Flea's
for me.
phenomenal. My dad's a bass player too from years ago, and he loves Flea. He always just talk about Flea all the time, and we'd watch videos together, and you're like, man, that guy's so good.
Well, that pink Fender you got, is it still there?
Yeah.
That's a beautiful bass.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Flea bass that you have in the guitar room.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We've had a few different like Flea bass type of basses in, but that one's like right on.
Yeah.
But that's cool. I originally when I first sort of met you it was all radio station stuff. So the radio station stuff started, you said, in London like 23 years ago, but where were you before that?
I was in Windsor. I was at the time it was the Chum stations in Windsor, Detroit. I got my start on 89X and CKLW and the River, and those are all the stations I grew up listening to. So, I came to London for college and learned at Fanshawe. Went back home and did a couple years back there, and then got called to come back to London. Okay. So, it was great. It's kind of starting out in my hometown, but really London is my kind of new adopted hometown. Yeah. Yeah. Actually, I've spent more time in London than I have in anywhere else that I've lived. So, wow. Yeah.
And my mom's the same now. She spent more time in London. She grew up in a small town in Northern Ontario, and she told me the other day, she's like, yeah, I've spent more time in London now. So London's my home. Like, yes. London's, and I'm sure you feel the same way. I mean, I couldn't imagine the sound of F96 without your voice on it. Like, it would be weird.
It is weird. But yeah, it's been, it was a good ride at FM96, and it was, and it was also too, like I started, really started at the bottom as a, weekend, evening, overnight guy, and then became the music director, then program director, and, running a whole show. So it's one of those, radio stations is just such an institution in the city and such a great brand. And it was a pleasure to be a part of it.
Now, for people that don't know, because I don't even know, like, is that how it normally goes in radio? Like you start at the bottom and work your way up?
Yes, but not always at the same place.
Right.
I've been really fortunate to have, started somewhere and then been able to grow within the company to, this level and this level and this level. So, a lot of times, I've moved, but I've also moved within the company. I was in Windsor, different company, came to London with one company, and then got my first programming gig in Kingston with Chorus, and then came back to London, and then was able to grow back here. So it is odd to kind of be in the same, not go from here to this place to that place, and to kind of build something on your own, where you are.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
So you were telling me earlier at dinner that, program director, for those people that don't know, because again, I didn't even know this, but you're basically running most of the show, right?
All of it. Yeah.
Wow.
You're responsible for everything. Like you're responsible for, all of the basically everything that comes out of the transmitter or, over the internet. Everything is everybody says, everything that's played, everything that's done, you're responsible for. And, there's a lot of, coaching, guiding and strategizing. But that's it. And you're on call, 24/7. If there's something that's wrong, if there's a problem, you're the one that's dealing with it or finding the person that can deal with it.
Sure.
But
and getting it fixed.
Yeah.
100%. So there's obviously going to be a ton of recording students, radio students watching this, but also musicians and artists and people that are like, hey, how do I get my stuff on radio? Which I'm sure you get asked, a million times. But there's, a lot of younger people coming up that are doing, they're recording at home or they're finding a way to record and they want to get their music out there. And obviously social media has changed the game. Internet's changed the game. It's great. You talk about, streaming, even, chorus stations on the internet, but you got to get on. Like what is a way nowadays? Because I talked to, in episode 1, I talked to my friend Nick, who owns a label, and, he said, there's no possible way that you can sift through all the music that he gets as a label, or even, he owns Zip DJ, which is a DJ record pool. And he's getting music from labels all over the world. So it's just so difficult. But how do you guys in radio, how does that work? How do you pick what songs end up on the radio?
Well, it's a little bit different now than maybe what it was 10 years ago or 15 years ago. At the end of the day, what it comes down to is, and I like to call it kind of the sum of the whole. Whereas, like one thing, if you have something that's got to equal 100%, and, what does that 100% look like? If you get a song that is the greatest thing that's ever written, but it's done in somebody's basement, then, maybe that equals 75% because this thing is so great. Or you have something that is, the sound quality is not quite there, but the song is written for, this person or by this person who has some sort of story behind them.
Right.
And the poor sound quality is made up by the story. And the other part of it is the plan. So when it comes to like an artist that is, being worked by a record label or, a radio tracker or somebody, it's like, okay, this is good, but what's next? If we're going to jump out on this, is the next thing going to be better than this? Is there another two things after? If we decide that, we're going to put our weight behind this, is there a plan to help push it forward? And all of those things kind of make up that 100%.
Right.
And it doesn't quite matter what percentage each one of it is, but if it makes up for 100 in some way, shape, or form, then it should be something you should be able to get behind. But really, it's of all those things, there's 1,000 of them out there.
Sure.
And it's really tough. Like, and to say there's a story, I still think when it comes to, to rock music, to country music, to any kind of live, honest, authentic music, that a big part of your story can be what happens when you play in front of people.
Yeah.
And have you been here? And if you've been here, will people come back to see you? And to me, that's a big part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, especially because the stations generally get behind, a lot of the live music that's going on, right?
For sure.
And if people aren't going to come out to see these artists play, then what's the point, right?
And we always looked at that too, is like, especially with the Canadian acts. And London's been a really good community for that because of where we are and our proximity to everything and what's around us. A prime example is Tragically Hip. Sure, they were a great band in Kingston, but it wasn't until they, had a friend who went to Western, who knew somebody who was at the Spoke, and they were able to come down, drive 4 hours from Kingston, play in London, play at the Spoke at Western, and, get a following there, be able to drive back to Kingston, come back, like the stories that came out after Gord Downey died, more and more of that folklore of the Tragically Hip and their trips to London to come to Call the Office, to come to play at Western, to play at Fanshawe. John Young was on FM 96 shortly after he died, talking about how New Orleans is Sinking was like the last lyrics were written at the Fanshawe Student Union Building.
I didn't know that.
It was written in his office, and they finished it, and that night they played that song for the first time as a complete song, and it was completed here. 1987, 88, 89, and Tragically Hip played London on New Year's Eve, which for a band is a big thing.
It's a big deal, yeah.
So, there's that. There's the Glorious Sons, same thing. Kingston band, doing that trek up and down to 401. The Trues are another band.
Hamilton.
St. Catherine's really.
Yeah,
They were from Antigonish in Nova Scotia, moved to St. Catherine's.
Yeah.
Because it was cheap to live, gig in Toronto, but they were a band that radio got behind in 2002 and just went, you know what, these guys are great. We need to be behind them. And they kept coming back, and it became bigger and bigger and bigger. On the countryside, Tim Hicks, same deal. St. Catherine's guy, comes to London a lot, London's, Tim's, biggest thing, one of the biggest guys in country music in Canada. So, there is something to, radio and the community getting behind an artist and getting in front of people and playing and, being a part of something that's growing.
Yeah. So you'd say that, because what I'm hearing is the talent, Because there's a lot of people that are putting out music, but not necessarily all music is good, which is a relative thing, I suppose. And also, you mentioned it earlier, is performing, right? The experience that has to go hand in hand. And, so you can make a great song, but if you don't have a lasting experience that people have, they're not necessarily going to come back and watch you. So that's what I'm hearing is that's part of the equation.
100% that is. I still think it is. I mean, there's value to, look at my following online, look at how many streams I have, look at the, at how big my digital imprint is. But, I still believe that the thing that trumps everything is the experience that you can give somebody, live in their face.
Yeah.
And, to have those home bases that you can go to that are places that are friendly to you because you've been friendly to them.
Totally.
Yeah.
I was talking to someone not that long ago, and I said, there's all these part of the, the good part about today is that you have access to, things like YouTube and the internet, and you can see, all these incredible concerts and all these incredible things that have happened now and in the past, which is great. But part of the issue that can create for young artists that just don't understand the journey that those artists took to get there is that takes time. Like you have to build that to get to that point. And what I was saying to that person was that, I think that a realistic, cause I grew up doing, tribute bands and I was one of the first lighting guys that ever did lights for Wide Mouth Mason at Coca 97 when it was here in London at the Hilton. And I remember some of these bands when they were first starting. And, to me, success, if you want to, sort of, at least from a Canadian perspective, if you want to be successful, and this goes back to what you were saying, is try to put 200 people in a town, in a bunch of different towns consistently. Right. Mm-hmm. Try to put 200 people in London, try to put 200 people in Chatham, try to put 200 people, let alone 200 people in Lucan or St. Thomas or smaller towns. Right. That to me, if you can do that successfully, then you'll start to get bookings, right? Then people will start to book you because you got a regular following, and then it'll go from there. But I think there's this false expectation that young people have that they're going to, somebody's going to find them on YouTube and, within, 3 months, they're going to be, playing Budweiser Gardens or Scotiabank Arena. Right. Like, so, what are your thoughts on sort of the live music, filling a room with 200 people thing that I'm talking about?
Well, I think that's exactly it. I think the moment that you can fill a room with 200 people and then do it again and do it again somewhere else, then, that's just money in your pocket. That's everything. That's merch. That's people that are right into what you're doing. And build that, that radius, bigger and bigger and bigger. And then, eventually the bigger thing will happen where, these 200 people and those 200 people and these 200 people all come together. All of a sudden you get 1,000 people, for a bigger thing. And, it's almost like one of those things like Guitar Hero really got it right. When you sat down and played Guitar Hero and you're playing, the first level is the driveway.
Yeah.
And then the next level is like, the house party. And then the next level is this. And it's like, that's exactly it.
Yeah.
Sure, you can have a great following online, but what's it going to make you? How is that going to make you be like, are you going to make money off of that? And, a lot of times is, the answer is no. Really, it's the live experience. It's the people on people and, the like-minded people all in the same room getting off on the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's weird because you have, some people out there that say, well, hey, I got to have a big following on social media, otherwise record labels won't look at me.
And that's the hard reality right now, is that a lot of the major labels, that's what they look at. Is
which is completely against what we're talking about, right?
It is,
so this is why I want to get this out there.
It's a different thing. But the other thing though too, Ryan, is that it's a different world that we're living in. Like if you think of when, you and I were in our teens and early 20s, it's not like it is now.
No.
There's not that many places for bands to play. There's not that many places for our buddies to put together a 5-band bill on a Saturday afternoon, and, get your friends together who might be underage and, drinking at a bar or something like that, when you're, 16, 17 years old.
Yeah.
And it's dangerous, and it's, and it's fun to be like, yeah, we're here at this place, or we've rented this place to do this thing. That doesn't happen.
No, I know.
There isn't, as many regular places for people to play, and nobody's doing the other thing where it's like, okay, let's rent out this hall and we'll put a bill together and we'll have a matinee on a Saturday afternoon. When rock music and punk music and metal was all here, there was the places that you could do that at 2:00 in the afternoon on a Saturday.
Yep.
And it was a thing. And now that's not quite a thing.
No, it's not a thing at all. And I mean, you bring up the venue topic. It's a huge bone of contention for me, specifically in London. But I talk to people all over the country and the world for that matter, and it's happening everywhere. And it was happening before the last 3 years too. I mean, people say, "Oh, the last 3 years kicked the crap out of everybody." But listen, I was talking to guys from Florida, from LA, almost a decade ago, and there was already signs of there being issues with venues struggling in certain ways. Now the ways have changed over the last decade, but I was part of a committee here in town that went and got us, this UNESCO designation, and part of that was based on us how many venues we had playing live music, and certainly it's hugely appreciative that certain restaurants have, solos and duos and trios and all that in them. And that's great that they're supporting live music. Even, the local arts guys here support artists and pay them to play at certain venues and stuff. And that's great. But that's not what you're talking about. I mean, we're talking about, you mentioned venues like, Call the Office, Embassy, even some newer ones, 765, which is gone. There's all these places that gave opportunity to young bands, to people, to even young promoters, to come in and promote, nights and build a following behind whatever their brand was. And yeah, that's like, there's not very many places right now in town where you can do any of that anymore. And and that's happening. And it's an issue for sure. And I'm hoping that somehow, some way we figure out a way through that. But, a big part of that, and I was mentioning it earlier at dinner, a big part of that is just this erosion of the culture that is music. And it's through not having, in my opinion, places to play and places to create that art.
I think, yes, you're right. But I also think too, that there is and I alluded to it earlier, is the danger of the whole thing. Because in 2023, and I feel like it was just something that was just kind of washed to the side in the 90s or the 80s or the 70s, where, kids could come in and drink underage, or this could happen at this establishment. Whereas, now that the danger of that live experience is way more controlled when it comes to, security and, and all of that. And,
It's less rock and roll.
It is. There's less of that danger that is there of doing something you should not be doing.
Yeah, the rebel side of it.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's like, I know, what I was doing when I was, in my teens. And, and I think of my daughter who's, just a teenager going, I can't see her and her friends doing this, like nothing. It's like not that we're doing anything crazy, but you know what I mean. Like just like that. Like wow. Like I just can't. I can't imagine that in this kind of bubble of a world that we're living in right now.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the thing that kind of loses a bit of the rock and roll.
Yeah. No. I never thought of it that way, but it's true. I mean, there's always whether it's 70s, 80s, 90s, there was the punk era. There's all these different eras where people just wanted to be rebels, whether it was against the system or their parents or whatever.
But also think about the shows that you're doing now, not to call it any names or anything like that.
Sure.
But think of the productions that you guys are involved in now compared to the productions that would be 25, 30 years ago. And how much help is on the back end of the production.
Yeah.
How much perfection is expected
I was just going to say that,
the production, because, somebody's paying $500 for a ticket for this thing, so it better be perfect. Rather than, let's say, the Rolling Stones in 1988 and coming out and just being the Rolling Stones, and hopefully it's good.
Yeah. Stack a bunch of speakers up.
Yeah. It really
push
is.
the microphones forward.
Yeah. And that's it. And it is that the world that we're living in where people expect perfection because, I can give you 60 seconds of a video on Instagram or TikTok, but I can give you 10 seconds that looks really good.
Yeah.
And
you touched
or filter it to shit. And and oh my God, you're beautiful.
And I think that the interesting thing, there's so many ways to weigh this, but the interesting thing is that, I personally think that, all this perfection, to the untrained ear, maybe, but to the trained ear, like I can hear when people are playing their own original material, right? Like when somebody writes their own material and they're playing it, I know, right? Because it's not as polished and there's lots of ad-libbing going on and there's huge emotion in it and there's a passion behind it that even if there was I'm a lighting guy. So even if there was no lighting rig, no video wall, nothing, if it was just that person, guitar, piano, whatever it is, and a microphone, it would be amazing. And like when my brother-in-law was going to get into singing, he was looking at getting into singing, I played him a bunch of different people, right? Gabriel and Keith Urban, a bunch of different people. And most of what I played him was them solo, right? Playing and just passionately, emotionally, just, giving her. And there's no production, I'm sure there's production behind it, but, minimal, right? For that song. And so it's, we're in a production business and we've been doing that our whole lives. My dad's been doing it over 40 years. And like when I started 27 years ago now, like I said, I was doing, Tragically Hip tribute bands in Lucan at the arena, with next to no lighting, no crew, and now we're doing these huge productions. But I think that the internet changed that, right? And it's not just music that's gone through this either, right? It's everything. It's the travel industry. Yeah. It's everyone has gone through this thing where now a young person can go on their phone and see this incredible cruise ship or this incredible concert or this incredible...
And their expectations are here.
Right. Yeah. Before they even learn the instrument.
Yeah.
Before they even listen to the album. Before they even see the artist live.
Before they go to the place, my expectations are here. My expectations are perfection.
Right.
Rather than the emotion, of it.
Yeah.
If you think of like looking at, to me, one of the last bands that had that emotion would be Rage Against the Machine.
Yeah.
And if you listen to some of that shit from the 90s, like, they're a really good band, but it sounds like shit. You know what I mean? Like, it's like in today's perspective, it sounds like shit. But the emotion is
the performance
is here, and the performance and the people, and and it's just that. And that's what drew you into it. Whereas like today, if you were to do that, like it better sound like this.
Yeah. But I mean, with all the technology, like look how cheap it is to buy really good recording gear relative to years ago, right? You used to have to spend $250,000 to build a professional studio.
Yes.
Now for a couple grand, you can have a professional studio and a laptop, right? So I agree. I think, and we know a few guys that are engineers. I think, where that comes into play is, don't necessarily, go to school, learn how to record yourself, all good. But, quicker path to success being get a decent engineer, get someone that has that as their passion, and you focus on being the artist. That's my sort of perspective on that is, you create the art, you get that emotional, performance, that art that you're going to put out into the world, perfect the crap out of it. And then, find someone that believes in you, that believes in that energy and that performance that you have and the art that you're bringing to the table. If you need, financial support, my theory is it will show up. I've seen a lot of, even just out of London here, I've worked with a number of different bands myself and said, hey man, you're really good. Like I'd love to record you in the studio and we'd love to work with you. So there's people out there that will work with people that are really talented and passionate and care, right? Like, and have good personalities and attitude. I think that's another big thing too with people coming up right now is they have to realize that a lot of these, and certainly not everyone, because I've heard stories of, artists being complete, douches to people, but there's a lot of people that, the way they stay in the industry and connect and grow is to be nice to people, right? Imagine that concept.
Yeah.
And so, there's that. And so, building your network and, engineers are part of that. Radio people are part of that. But, that goes back to what you're saying earlier about, what's the total package, right?
Yeah.
And how important is that total package in the grand scheme of things, right? It's super important.
Yeah. And funny, I'll even go back to the band I just mentioned, Rage Against the Machine. Like the total package of that band, and I saw them last summer when they came to Hamilton, and it was the best concert I've ever been to in my life.
Wow.
It was absolutely the best. Band sounded great. Songs are great. The whole thing. But, at the end of the day, it comes back to that emotion and the feeling of the people and the crowd and, that everybody is into this thing that's happening right now. And that was probably the best that I've seen that. And, you can take all those other things, that they do great, but that's the thing that is the thing that they do best.
Yeah, totally. And so, what do you like, cause I've run into this, so I want to bring it up. Like, what do you say to the, the people out there that are control freaks in their career and want to control everything? They want to do their own social media. They want to, do all their own, when they want to control everything and there's not enough time to do it all and they're frustrated. Like, what do you have to say to those people?
Well, I think, you can't control everything. And, with everything that needs to be a part of what it needs to be with a band today, because 30 years ago it was, here's our music, this is what it looks like, here's what the live show looks like, and this is the design of our merch. Whereas now there's, this is what our social looks like, this is what we're doing on a day-to-day, this is the, what our website and everything looks like, and this is how we're communicating with people. And the reality is that you can't do, regardless of what you're doing, in whatever you're doing, you cannot control everything all at once. And to be a band today, you have to have the right people around you that you can put trust into to be able to do that. Because if you try and do everything, something else is going to suffer. And more or less, it's going to be your music that suffers, because that should be the number one thing that you are a part of.
Yeah, 100%. And that's what I've tried to tell, some of the artists that I've worked with. I said, hey, don't worry about these other things. We'll make sure those things get taken care of. Just rehearse, focus on the art, focus on the live show. What's going to happen in between this song and this song? They're like, what do you mean? I said, no. In between this song and this song, there's going to be some time. What's in that time?
Yeah.
Do you use that time to connect with the audience, or what, is it just dead air?
Are you doing that time to fart around and tune your guitar?
Yeah.
And how interesting is that for somebody? Pretty shitty.
Yeah, totally. It's the awkward silence.
Exactly.
Especially if it's not a festival, if it's like a club gig.
Yeah.
Everybody's like, okay.
Anywho, so.
Yeah, it's the part where if you're in your car, you change the channel.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the time in between the performances. It's the time in between the notes even, there was somebody I saw the other day talking about that, about the, what happens in between the kick drums, what happens in between the notes. And it's the same in between the performances. What happens on stage? What's your total performance? Mm-hmm. Don't lose the vibe, right? The vibe in a room, like especially club gigs, because they're smaller and everybody's very energetically connected in the room after a certain period of time in that performance. And if you lose them, it's a problem, right? You gotta keep that momentum going.
You lose them, it's real hard to get them back.
Yeah, 100%. What do you think about going back to the venue thing? Like, I know that I've talked to some venue people and they're like, well, nowadays it's really hard to get insurance. And a bunch of them, had to switch because they could keep, they were more, what were they calling that? They were more not relevant, but they were because they serve food, they turned themselves into restaurants. They started serving food. They were able to stay open. And now they're like, oh, we're making some more money. This is another revenue stream. So they're not switching back, but now they're not really focused on live music.
There was the place that was, shit, I forgot the name of the bar. There was a bar across the street from Wrigley Field in Chicago. And at night they would have punk rock bands in there, because in the old days, Wrigley Field didn't have lights. So all the games at Wrigley Field, Chicago, where the Cubs played, were during the daytime.
Right.
And then by, 6 o'clock, they're gone, because the game's over and people are gone. So they would put bands in there at night, this like cubby bar. And, I think that's one of the big things with a lot of these venues, is that they've kind of lost the necessity to, we can bring in a whole different audience at this time, because this is the time we're hot and this is the time we're not. And when we're not, there isn't that thing.
So they brought in those bands at night because because the audience was gone anyway.
Yeah, the regular baseball audience was out of there, and then they bring in the punk bands at night. It's just a whole changeover in the audience. That's how they made a living.
So would you argue that venues aren't being as innovative? Is that what you?
Well, I think there's that, but I also think go back to the point I made earlier is that it's tough. It gets you go to a show now, like there's security, there's people. It's not just, some dude at the door, and whatever happens inside, happens. Like,
Yep.
That's just not the case anymore in the world that we live in. And that part of the world is gone.
Yeah. Yeah. So it makes it harder for the venues to take the risk, right? The liability of the whole thing.
100%. Yeah.
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 Yeah, that's super relevant. I even know a bar owner that hasn't owned a bar in almost a decade. And last time I talked to him, which was a while ago now, but he was still in court for something that happened. It wasn't even technically on his property. It was a tent that was in the parking lot next door, and it was a sign that fell down that he didn't even own. It was the beer companies, you know what I mean? But you know how that works. They just slap a lawsuit on everybody, and the biggest fish usually is the one that pays out. But yeah, the liability of all of that, and not just in shows and music, like the liability shift in general, like that, it's caused a lot of issues with.
Well, it's the same thing when it comes to booking somebody. There isn't a band being worked by any kind of artist management group, big or small, that isn't going to go, okay, well, what are the precautions that are going to take place in this venue with our artist, with our band? Not just, we'll do this for a couple grand, perfect, we'll show up,
right?
That's just not the case. So it's just a different world in that respect.
Yeah, it's changed a lot, from back in the 90s, to now. It's changed dramatically. And, the young people of today have no idea, even the students, we're in, it's O Week right now in London. And, these students have no idea what Joe Cool's was like 3 years ago.
Sure.
Right. It's totally changed now. Yeah. It used to be a different crowd.
We used to rent out the Masonic Temple in Windsor, and there'd be a guy at the door, and that was it. And, be 5-6 bands on in the afternoon.
Yeah.
Changing gear over, and people, 14 to whatever years old, coming out to see, we rent a church basement, like that kind of thing. And something that just nobody would kind of bat an eye at.
Sure. So you think bands should start try to put shows back together again? Is that something that people should do?
I think a real interesting idea. And I mean, if you were to take, all of the liability and that kind of stuff out of it, I think that an interesting idea would be for the clubs. And when I say the clubs, I mean like the international clubs to open up their places for something.
Right.
Because 20, 30 years ago, the Dutch club would have been a happening place on a Friday afternoon. The Italian club would have been a happening place, after work. The German club, so on and so forth. You got all these rooms now that are basically open all the time outside of, maybe a wedding. Why couldn't there be something happening there?
Yeah, totally.
These places that already have a liquor license in place, that already have some sort of sense of, normality within the building, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And you're not interrupting something. There's a ton of them around, and it's a lot different than when, our parents and our parents' parents were, immigrants to this country, and they would collect with these clubs.
Yeah, we got
some of them are closing, some of them are done. Maybe that's a spot.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not a viable thing for, Joe Regular Bar to, put a bunch of bands in on, a Saturday afternoon.
Well, they're cultural centers, right? Like, which is the cool part of the synergy of it all is they were cultural centers for those groups and those cultures, and
that's where business was done.
And so now the culture is changing and shifting because now you've got multiple generations now that have been alive in this country. So basically what you're talking about is just taking the existing business model and just shifting it to adapt to the culture that's here.
Yeah.
That's here now. Right. Yeah. Because that older culture that spoke the same language, that got together to talk about the old country and the stories. Did business. Yeah. They're, a lot of them have passed on or have, don't go anymore and aren't as interested. So yeah, I would say that's a great idea. And I've actually seen some of that too. There's a couple of places here in town that have, I've allowed some young promoters to kind of come in and start doing some of that. Mm-hmm. And it's been,
and they have been successful. Doing it, over at the Dutch Club, I know that, they're doing like wrestling at the Marconi Club, like that kind of thing. But, using these rooms, as a room rather than just, a cultural center.
Yeah. So. 100%. So just to kind of, we obviously, both know Bob. Bob was on the last episode with me talking about, his journey and the stuff that he's done. And you've obviously spent a ton of time with Bob. Like how did you guys meet? How did that all start? The Brad and Bob sort of relationship?
Bob and I, there was a group of us about 20 some odd years ago that started to get together, and it was all like music and record and radio people that would get together, play road hockey, like ball hockey on Thursday nights. And I met Bob through there, but it was right around the time that Bob was releasing his first record. And I remember Bob coming to, because I used to DJ at the Seeps on Sunday nights.
Okay.
For a good, 5 years or something like that every Sunday. And I met Bob at hockey, but he came out and we kind of had some one-on-one time and came and brought me a copy of his disc, some merch, and, we shot the shit, while I'm DJing at the Seeps, and it's 9:00 before anybody's there. So the next morning, I went back into work and I had Bob's CD and I threw it in, and then the first song was Big Cannons. So I was like, well, this is something. And at the time I had the idea of Brad's basement party, which was this Friday night thing that we were going to do, and, come up with this, we're going to be live from my basement every Friday. And I went, this song actually could be like a good. I wanted a theme song. I wanted like that, here's the entrance to everything. And when I heard Big Can, I was like, this is it. And
that's a great tune.
So sure enough, Big Cannons became the theme song to that. And it was a good decade in London that whole program ran. And every Friday night at 9:00, it was like, the church bells going off downtown, and boom, 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 boom. And it was, as soon as Big Cannon, you knew exactly where you were on Friday night in London when you heard Big Cannons on a Friday. Like, oh, it's 9:00, and then look, there it is. So, anyway, after that, Bob and I just started hanging out. And we haven't stopped since. So.
Yeah, Bob's a great guy.
Yeah, that's pretty much the beginning of everything.
And you guys obviously, have played. You got your own couple bands going on, right? What are the bands you have going on?
Well, Brother Time is one that I joined with Darcy Mosley, and his late brother Lane, who passed away last year.
Yeah.
They were Brother Time, and then they brought me in as a bass player. And Darcy, who also plays with Bob in Noxious. And then I have the All-Star Band, which came about with, it was actually Bob's idea, because we had and it's more of a radio story than anything. There was a girl that called in to the morning show wanting to advertise a bottle drive for her mom. She was raising money for her mom, who had cancer and needed, to get stuff that just the system didn't cover.
Right.
So she calls in, we talk about it, and then a week later, Taz and Jim call this girl back, ask her how she did with their bottle drive, and she raised $700. And I'm like, oh, it's great. So yeah, but my hockey team did like $3,000 a week before. I'm like, oh God. So they hear that, and it's almost like everybody heard that one thing. So, after that, I get a call from the morning show from Taz and Jim going, what can we do? Bob calls me and goes, did you hear that girl on the radio this morning? What can we do? And then I've got a call from people at Powerhouse going, I heard that girl this morning. What can we do? So they just kind of took all the three things together. What can we do? I'm like, well, okay, what we should do is we should do some sort of fundraiser at Powerhouse, which at the time was just opening. And so I made the introduction of Bob and the people at Powerhouse. So Bob and I go down there to do the introduction. And we talk about it. Great. Okay, we're going to do this. Perfect. We're going to raise some money. We're going to do bottle drive. Okay, great. Perfect. All right. Awesome. Bob's going to play the grand opening at Powerhouse. And Val, who was running the place at the time, she looks at Bob and she goes, okay, so who's going to open up for you? Have you got an opener? He goes, yep, Brad and his buddies. And she looks at me and she goes, okay, what's the name of your band? And I'm like, the Brad Gibb All-Star Band. She goes, okay, great. And she leaves. And I look at Bob and go, I don't have a fucking band. like, dude, this thing's like 2.5 weeks away. I'm like, we literally just made that up. He goes, well, call up some buddies and make up a band. So I called Aaron Allen and told him we need to make a band. Like, come on over and we'll find a drummer. And then the three of us here's the songs that I know. And then Aaron came over and he said, yeah, Jared Ewell from the Heart Attack Kids was just over. And I was telling Buddy, he wants to know if he can join. I'm like, bring him out. So then it just became this thing where we just started bringing everybody out. And these guys are all like, my brothers now. And, we've got, the All-Star Band, which is basically just a band that does loud versions of cover songs. But at the end, like, we've raised a shit ton of money for a lot of people, and that really is the other thing that's been the greatest thing about it, is really like, we can do something and we can raise money for a lot of things. Yeah, that's cool. And have fun at the same time. Yeah, and connect with these, and they're all great musicians too, like that you're talking about. I know them all, and they're all phenomenal players, and like the energy I've seen you guys play on stage, the energy's fantastic. Yeah. Just, the biggest thing for me is to surround yourself with people that are way better than you. That's cool. And for a good cause in the meantime, right? Yeah. Yeah. How much did you end up raising? Do you know? We've raised, I would say, I couldn't put a dollar figure on it, but I would say we've been a part of probably about $100,000 in the last few years. Wow. From all the different things. Now that's not just us. I mean, we've done, we did with Bob, we did, 12 with Cindy's Law. We, did the Fire Rocks concert for Parkville firefighters, and, the food drive and everything. I mean, we've helped raise a lot of money, and, put, a lot of different things on a pedestal, which has been great, whether it's fire extinguishers for Cindy, Taz and Jim's toy drive, We just did a thing for for Jim Kelly's part of the Fight to End Homelessness, coming up this November.
Yeah.
And once again, we just have a fun time doing it. And if we can help put a spotlight on something, and and raise some money to help out a cause, then why not?
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And you were in the Fight to End Homeless too, right?
Yeah, I fought last year.
Nice.
It's great.
Yeah, it's we're involved in that too. We do the production for it.
I know you did. You guys, it more than anything. The first year that it happened, and we were kind of a half-ass sponsor the first year. I walked in with Jim. 2 minutes in, I looked at Jim and I go, "We gotta own this thing." He goes, "Really?" He goes, "Look at this." I'm like, if Evander Holyfield would have walked out right now, I'm like, I would have not batted an eye. I'm like, this is an amazing event. This is an amazing charity. So we need to be like the principal media sponsor for this and be 100% right behind it. And you guys do a great job at the production. Like it's amazing. Brett and his team do a great job with putting the whole thing together, and Coach Mark and everybody over at the at Boomers, training everybody and the fund. Like, God, we raised $300,000 last year. Ridiculous.
Yeah, that's amazing.
For this thing. So it really, to me, that is just such the premier event in this city for fundraising. Like there's the magical winter ball. There's the black dress, little red dress, all the things, right? The Fight to End to me is like, and that is just the city putting itself going, look at what we can do. Look what you guys can do.
And it's all walks of life too.
It's like The Simpsons.
It's crazy.
This guy washes windows. She works at Western. This guy's a radio guy.
There's one of the women that works at the chamber. Like in the office.
They all come out and they beat the snot out of each other and they raise a bunch of money. It's a great event. It really is.
Yeah. And that first one was magical. I know exactly what you're talking about because I was there and I was hanging out at the back of the room and I was like, it really did feel big time, especially for London too. It was like, it was like, wow, this is really cool.
I am not kidding, man. If Mike Tyson came out of that back and was like, okay, he belongs to be here because it looks that good. So
yeah, well, thanks, man. Yeah. Appreciate that. But yeah, the charity thing, Bob, I didn't realize. I mean, I know both you guys. I feel pretty well, and I didn't realize how much charity stuff that you guys are actually doing all the time because I'm so busy running around doing my thing, and so I'm kudos to you and Bob and everybody.
Well, that's part of the help though too. I mean, you're just as much as part of that. Like when it comes to like when we're renting stuff for things, and the help that we get from from you and your family, like that's. Like the Santa, at the end, we all want our guys to go home with something. Like it's not just, like for me, it's fun. Like everything that we do is fun. But, I want to make sure that everybody's making something, or at least covering their gas, to get there. And I'll tell you, every year for that Santa Claus parade, the money that the band makes for the Santa Claus parade goes directly to the toy drive.
That's awesome.
It's not going into somebody's pocket. It's because we're doing this for this.
Yeah. Yeah. The Santa Claus thing has been great for us. I mean, I've sponsored Santa's float now for, I don't even know, 15 years, I think. Well over a decade anyway. But it's, when you see the faces of the kids and even the parents and just what it does for people and how it brings their spirits up. I mean, you can't not do it. You can't not do it. You have to.
It's the funniest thing though, too. I mean, because I've had to sub in on bass with Bob for the last couple of years for the Santa Claus parade. And it's pretty funny when you're on a stage because you'll come along and there's 10 kids and there's 9 kids that are just, and then there's the 10th kid that like, it's the most horrifying thing. Like, you're there just playing. You're like, and you see some kid going, this is the worst. Pretty funny.
Well, at least the ratio is 9
right.
to 1.
It's like toothpaste. 9 out of 10 say it's okay.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you know, there's, like I said earlier, there's a lot of younger people sort of watching this. I mean, what sort of inspirational things can you say to young artists, young promoters, people wanting to kind of get into, you know, even rock? You know, we talked earlier at dinner about, you know, the rock scene, and I'd love to see the rock scene come back. And, you know, barring the whole venue and liability conversation, you know, what are some of the things that, you know, you think young people coming up in the rock and country scenes, or any music genre for that matter, should do to get from where they are now, which is anywhere from, you know, in their basement to trying to make it on the radio to trying to get a record deal? Like, what do you think the future of music is going to be? And, you know, what do you think these people should focus on?
Keep playing. Play in front of everybody. The best thing that best lesson that I learned in the last 20 years was from the Seinfeld documentary Comedian. And there's a scene in that, and this is where, if you don't know Comedian, Seinfeld finished Seinfeld, did his last tour, and then ditched all of his material. Said, I'm not doing any of that stuff anymore. And wrote a whole new set, wrote all new jokes, and then started over. And, you know, started doing like the club circuit in New York. Whereas like people would, you know, it'd be like a Saturday afternoon at 2:00, and all of a sudden it'd be just whatever comedian, and it'd be like, ladies and gentlemen, Jerry Seinfeld. And then Seinfeld would come out, biggest comedian in the world, doing all new material. And there's some great scenes in that where, you know, he's doing that on a Saturday afternoon or a Tuesday or a Thursday or whatever. And he forgets where he is in his joke, and he has to turn around, and he's got to look back, and he's got to look through his notes, and he's got to find, you know, his thing. And, you know, he is the biggest comedian in the world, and people are heckling him, as they should, because he's lost his spot. And there's a scene in that movie where it's him and Colin Quinn, who was on Saturday Night Live at the time.
Right.
And Seinfeld's agent calls him and is like, you know, we can get you on at the whatever club this afternoon. He's like, I don't want to do that. And Colin Quinn goes, no. He goes, you go do that. You go, if you go do this, you're going to go down to the subway station. You're going to go here. You're going to play in every single front of audience that you need to be. And that's exactly what bands need to do. That's exactly what everybody needs to do, is to go and get in front of every single type of audience that they can be in front of. Because the moment that you become part of in front of that audience is the moment that you know how to deal with that audience. So the next time that situation comes up, you're that much better. And that's exactly what everybody can do, is get off of, don't worry about, you know, sure, social and everything is a big part of what we need to do, but that's not going to make up for how you can be a part of the real live experience that's going to happen and what that's going to be like.
Awesome. Brad, thanks so much for coming on, man. Appreciate it.
As always.
Thanks, everybody. Take care. Episode number 4 wrapped up here with Brad Gibb. Brian from Music City Live. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you on the next episode.
Thank you for watching Music City Live. If you like this episode, like the video. And for more clips and episodes, subscribe to the channel. Feel free to join the conversation by commenting below, and visit us at musiccityliveshow.com.